Good morning and welcome to the third day of the Brazil PDAC 2021 series of events. This morning, we're hosting our second Brazilian mining sessions, Investment Outlook for Mineral Exploration in Brazil. I'm Carolina Albernas, CEO at the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your MC today. I would just like to thank quickly all our sponsoring companies for the trust and support, all our partners. Without you, this event wouldn't be possible. So we have a packed agenda today. Without further ado, I would like to invite our chairman today, Luiz Mauricio Azevedo, president at ABPM, the Brazilian Association for Mineral Research Companies, who will lead the discussion today. Luiz.
Thank you, Carolina. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this beautiful morning as I'm speaking from Fortaleza, Ceará. Thanks to each and every one of you being here with us today. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you who have been with us in the Brazil PDAC since last Friday. I'm sure all of you are enjoying as much as possible this unique opportunity of virtual conference, but with the hopes that next year we will be able to come back to the usual person PDAC in Toronto, as has always been. Also hoping that we all overcome this pandemic healthy, safe, and sound. With due respect of some of us who have been impacted by the COVID at higher or lesser degree, I believe it's very important before we start to remind why we are here. The current global health crisis reminds us that what affects our families has to be addressed by all of us collectively. The solution to this crisis, as to many other problems, especially concerning health and the environment, depends on international cooperation. PDAC is not only a congress, it's a reminder that this cooperation does exist in mining. And for a long time, since we, the prospectors, decided to meet in Toronto to share with each other our experience, difficulties, needs, fortunes, and frustrations, looking to how we could help each other, how we can share and improve our methods and techniques in mining, and more recently, how we can make it more sustainable, efficient to the environment. While I still find people that doubt that life can even return to normal, I'm increasingly optimistic as we see vaccination around the globe is exponentially being deployed, bringing us hope that we will see a fairly good fraction of the world population protected sooner than later. And at certain point, hopefully we will get back to life, if not the very same, but close to what was before COVID. Nonetheless, our lives have been forever changed by the coronavirus pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of people around the world have unfortunately passed away. Millions have lost their jobs. In that sense, we are here having an important role providing our contribution to what we know best to the restored economy, which will reflect in the lives of millions of families. Our projects and our products make it possible. That's our purpose. That's mining. That's why we are here today. I think all of us have done our best to accommodate and be part of this rather unusual PDAC. Congrats to all of us. We should have to say that without the coordinator and great effort of the BCCC, and especially Carolina, Ajimb, Roberto and his team, Secretary of Mines and Minister of Mines, and all the sponsors, that would never been possible. So on behalf of our audience, I would like to say thank you and congratulations for their hard work in making this program to happen for the benefit of all of us. As you moderated this Tuesday session of Brazilian Mining Investment, which is investments opportunity in Brazil, I would like to introduce our panelists. Mr. Paulo Castellari. Paulo, can you open your camera?
Hi, Luiz Mauricio.
Paulo is a CEO at Appian Capital, and he will speak about investments opportunity in nickel. As we pass to others, I will introduce each individually. Paulo, please welcome to our session, and please, as you wish, you can start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luis, and good morning, good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join. It is great and also humbling to be here with you, Luis, with my good friend Carlos Gonzalez, with whom I had the pleasure to work in the past, Mike, Roberto. So it's great to be here with you, and I'm very much looking forward to our session today. Special thanks for Carolina and the entire team. It's really fantastic to be here with you, regardless of the format. And I couldn't speak in a better way than you did, Luis, around the value of this event and everything that can be achieved, again, regardless of the format. So thank you very much for the opportunity. What I wanted to do today, it's really we prepared a few pages just to guide our conversation. I promise that I'll be as brief as possible so that we can use the time as best as we can. What I wanted to do today is to provide you a little bit of an overview of Appian Capital here in Brazil and what is it that we do. Provide you a little bit of a snapshot of our assets in Brazil. We have an operating asset and a project under construction. Share our vision about Brazil and what is it that Appian's management think about the country and prospects and all that. Discuss why we're so excited about the projects we're involved with, being copper and nickel, as you said, Luis, and then close out with our philosophy and the way that we work here in Appian Capital. So starting then with our vision, I wanted to provide you a little bit of an overview. What is it that we do? I mean, our vision is to be Brazil's pure play in the battery space. How is it that we're going to do it? Our strategy is to identify, build, and operate assets that are scalable, that offer a defensive position in the cost curve. And how is it that we do it? We are part of a global portfolio managed by Appian Capital Advisory, which is a private equity firm focused in mining with a very successful track record in identifying value-adding opportunities in the mining sector. We control and manage 2 assets here in Brazil, and I'll provide you a little bit more detail on those. But we have a very interesting, very modern, very intelligent business model, in my opinion, which is really bringing together world best practices in the technical and mining world, geology, mining, metallurgy, everything, as well as with very strong financial muscle and financial knowledge. So we link these two to make sure that we find these opportunities, we deploy the techniques and the strategies that we have accumulated over the years, and then add value to assets that are then passed on to final owners. That's the business model, and that's what we do. Talking a little bit about the 2 assets we have one operating nickel mine in the state of Bahia and one copper asset that is under construction in the state of Alagoas. Both of them very good infrastructure. They are located in mining-friendly jurisdictions, and it's been a great pleasure actually to be working in these 2 locations. Starting with the Santa Rita mine, which is controlled by Atlantic Nickel. This is our operating mine. We restarted operations just over 12 months ago, probably 15 months ago. We have just under 2,000 people now working at site. As I think you all are aware, this is one of the very few nickel sulfide mines in the world. It is the only one operating in Brazil. We have acquired this asset. We have revised the entire operating model and operating strategy for this asset. And this is now a long life, low cost operation, producing the right product safely and responsibly. Moving to Serrote, which I'm sure that many of you are aware of this project. This is controlled by Mineração Vale Verde. This is under construction. We have now, at the end of January, just reached 95% completion of this project. This is, again, a scalable copper operation. We started construction back in January 2019. And as I mentioned just now, by the end of January, we were at 95% and closed February with just over 97%. So we're very close to starting operations over there. Moving on, we felt it would be important to mention, although I am sure that many people in the audience are fully aware of some of these attributes that we have in your screen, it will be important to share with you some of our thoughts and some of relevant aspects of the Brazilian economy and general aspects of Brazil as a country. I think most people are aware that Brazil is a large, diversified economy, but I'm not sure that many people are aware of the size of the mining industry at this end, and also the respective value chain that mining brings, the quality of our labor, the fact that we have top-class universities across the country covering the entire mining value chain, the fact that many of us mining professionals, Brazilian mining professionals, are very experienced and very familiar with the international investment scene. So what I wanted to share with you is just a few data points showing that Brazil is actually an economy that's larger than Canada. And when looking at mining, actually bigger than Chile and almost as big as Canada. So traditionally, over the past 25, 30 years that I've been involved in the industry, that's what we always heard, reference countries like Canada, like Chile. But as I said, not many people are actually aware of the size and the impact that Brazil can make in this industry. Also, the fact that historically we've been ranking very positively in South America, risk ratings improving and all that. And perhaps a final comment on this before we flick to the next page. Many of us who have been involved in mining investments in other jurisdictions around the world often face the challenge of showing to investors that Brazil is a much better place to invest than many other countries that many of us have worked. So I think this is a very important part. When I spoke with Carolina and the team before the preparation for this session, we invested a little bit of time in this topic, making sure that we embrace this mission of showing how attractive and how prepared we at this end are to take on mining investments. Very quickly moving to nickel, I think we all know what's happening in the industry. We just wanted to show and share with you our vision and why is it that we're so excited about nickel. We all know that there are two main types of nickel ores, saprolites and the sulfides. There are different ways of treating these ores, generating different products for different uses. But I think the key message here that I wanted to share with you is that the industry drivers are changing dramatically. We expect a significant increase in demand. We're talking about in the region of 4.4 million tons from 2.5 or something today. So over the next 20 years, a significant increase in demand. And as importantly, showing a big supply gap going forward. And this increase, as we all know, is backed by the growth in demand for the batteries value chain and for supplying this industry. And I think the biggest data point here, the biggest fact to share with you and the audience is the fact that from a mere 7% nickel being used in batteries, we expect this to be almost 40% in less than 20 years from now. So this is going to be a major shift. And of course, we need to be prepared. And we all know that nickel sulfides are more suitable for input for this industry. And this is why we believe that the demand for sulfides will be much bigger. And this is why we are so excited, not only investing in this nickel sulfide mine that I mentioned with you, Atlantic Nickel and Santa Rita mine, but also looking very actively for other investments. As I said, our vision is to become Brazil's pure play in the battery industry. If we flicked to copper very quickly, we continue. We're also very positive about copper. We believe that linked to very strong fundamentals such as industrialization, urbanization, and also electrification. I mean, copper is the material of choice for electricity transmission and for electrical motors. So copper will remain attractive. Also sharing some numbers with you, presenting a steady growth with more than 2% CAGR for the next 20 years, and also presenting a significant gap in the supply-demand curve. So moving on and closing out, as I said, I want to be as fast as I can to provide time for discussions. We wanted to close out the conversation about Appian Capital Brazil being a Brazilian mining champion, but also sharing with you how we do business. We have put together a platform here in Brazil made up by a small team that support these two assets that I shared with you, linking up with our team that has a lot of experience in London. And I think this recipe has been very successful. Everything we do is guided by our ESG principles and our ESG philosophy. We use, and something that is very close to our heart, something that the team and I have been doing for some time now in other companies we've worked, using the concept of social integration, always looking at the social, the environmental, and the economic aspect of everything we do, making sure that in each step we take, everything is equitable, is viable, is fair, and agreed. This is truly the only way we believe that will ensure continuity, understanding what matters, investing time with our stakeholders, applying best-in-class practices, and also taking on the responsibility to raise the bar. I think all of us in mining, typically we get into areas that are remote, areas that not always are very developed, and we must embrace the responsibility of raising the bar, improving the standard of living, contributing to the community, and working together with the community. So for my side, this is what I wanted to share with you. I wanted to once again thank you, the board. Thank you, Carolina, for the opportunity. And Luis Mauricio, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paulo. A very comprehensive and a good view of what you've been doing. And for sure, we're going to have a lot of questions from the audience pretty soon. Well, our next panelist is Carlos Gonzalez from Oz Minerals, which will speak about investment opportunities in copper. Carlos, please, can you tell us a little bit about Oz, your goals there? Here we are, Carlos.
Okay, thank you, Luis. Good morning or afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to make part of PDAC this year. And a special thanks for Carolina, Roberto, and Luis for the organization and to make it happen. I'd like to congratulate my friend Paulo Castellari for the excellent presentation, give a very good overview about the nickel and copper Appian projects in Brazil and the market in general. And also congratulate Miles Thompson and Mike Hodgson that will present later than me. I will share my presentation with you. I think the first question is how is working in a modern mining company, is a considered modern mining company as Oz Minerals. I think this is a very interesting, just a briefing about since Oz Minerals has acquired Avanco in 2018, Oz started a handover process. And during the handover process, including my arrival at the company in 2019, I think the very important initiative it was inviting me for an induction in Australia in a period of 2 months to know the company, to meet people, to meet my peers, but the most important, to meet the culture of Oz Minerals and to know the Oz way and the aspirations of Oz. I think this is just a small picture about but translate everything that it means. The Oz Minerals is a global copper player listed in ASX. Brazil is the first operation overseas. It's very important for us Brazilian projects because it is the first operation and it make a very important project for them. And the picture, when you see in the central point about the value creation, just a second here to move the screen for, yeah. When you see the value creation, this is the Oz way. We are a global copper player, and on the base of this is how we work together. That is our aspiration. Including this, we have a partnership and evolved and agile and invest in responsibility and lean and innovative. Who moves everything to make a modern mining company and going beyond what's possible to make lives better is the context. That is the external view about the company's microenvironment, stakeholder expectations, constitution, laws. Our choice, that is our strategy, the appetite to risk, policies, code of conduct. Our enables is the organizational model, process standard, performance standards. Until this, we created this together with all employees participating on this building the strategy. But from this ahead, we have a devolved model that is considered as modern, but you have autonomy on the site. The general manager of the asset has autonomy to decide about our work. That is the risk that he will take. Business plan, capability, goals. He recommends for the company about this. And of course, to check this is our performance that checks compliance, reporting, engagement, and assurance. It only makes sense if we consider all stakeholders, including employee, community, government, suppliers, and shareholder. I think this governance based on Ozway and its aspiration that define clearly the strategy and what and how the company works. We here in Brazil, we have our enablers are already implemented in Brazil. And there is a natural challenge, of course, to embed the OZ culture to the Brazilian team. It will take a bit longer, but this is still in progress. But it's very important, the alignment with the Brazil and Australian team. I think in terms of aspiration, it's just a quick overview. The how we work together is the foundation of this document. I think the principle states that speaks on innovating, including collaborating, planning, delivering, and integrity. How we work together, commandments, how we work on the day by day at the company. We don't know, we simply use them all the time. I think this is our golden rule, is the way that we work together here at the company. It promotes for Brazil and Australia, I think, again, the first operation in Brazil, a high-level work environment with a reliable interaction between the groups, collaboratively dealing with the technical and institutional issues. Oh, sorry. Here is talking about our projects in Brazil. We have projects located in the north of the country, especially in Pará and Maranhão state. We divided our projects in two big assets. One is Gurupi assets that's located in Maranhão, where we have a Central Gold project. And another one is Carajás asset, when we have an operation in Antas mine, the previous Avanco copper mine. And we are also developing Pedra Branca, underground, the second underground mining in the Pará state, but also Pantera and Santa Lúcia. They both of them are greenfield projects. We have some challenge to develop projects in Brazil. I think we are dealing at the same time with 4 or 5 different projects running and being developed at the same time. We needed to have a strong technical team to support the challenge to operate, to develop, to commissioning, and to explore the geology and the resource. Gurupi is more than just a Central Gold project. We see in Gurupi a great potential to host multiple large deposits. We have already drilling only 3% of Central Gold of Gurupi project, sorry. And we have more than almost 1 million ounces with almost 2 grams per ton of gold. We have some institutional challenge to unlock the high potential and operation, which is technically feasible, but we needed to spend more time and to be resilient, because this is a big challenge on developing, because it's related to artisanal miners working in our area, including the land owner is the government, and it's being managed by INCRA. And this is a little bit complicated, but if you have a resilience to go through this challenge, we are in face of a big province of gold that will make part of a big mining industry, gold mining industry in the near future. Here is talking about the business opportunity and environment in Brazil. I think I used the 5 stakeholders and talking about how Brazil is competitive in terms of the environment to make business in Brazil. And I think for the employee view, I think we have in Brazil skilled professionals in mining. We have a good fundamental of management, safe and sustainability. And we have the workforce in Brazil is motivated and flexible. In terms of community, we have now, this is recent, good reception for sustainable mining companies, but we need it to be sustainable. Better understand of exchange relationship between the company and the communities. And we have, of course, to support the development of the local natural vocation and to care and respect people and cultural heritage. The government, from the side of government values, I think is considered a favorable country for mine investments, low political and institutional risks, solid environmental and mining mineral legislation, and mining agents has been recently created to accelerate mineral projects. In terms of partners, I think Brazil has developed mining supply chain. We have important dealers in country, equipment and parts. We have skilled engineering and maintenance companies. I think it's very important when you go to make business in another country, have the security that you have good companies and good skilled people and good, let's say, political, institutional, low-level risks, and a solid investment. Brazil has a mining culture already established in the country. And for the end, in shareholders' value, I think for the shareholder view, Brazil, we have in a good moment in terms of commodities attractiveness. Paulo mentioned a little bit before about this. We have a great potential in Brazil for a variety of mineral resource everybody knows about. And we have a good infrastructure in the country, water, energy available, and logistics. This is make us a very good environment to make mining business in Brazil. I think an important point just to highlight is that a perspective that the mining acting as a development driver for regions considered the need and the undeveloped. Brazil is a populous country with the population poorly distributed and concentrated, the most part in the southeastern, in the capitals. In the green color, you can see better, but 60% of the population is concentrated in only 6% of the municipalities. How to deal with that, with living in the big cities and high populous cities as São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, with 12 million inhabitants, and how to distribute better the development. I think, and I'm sure that the mining activity is the development driving to reduce the inequality in the country. For this, we have to consider the community as an important stakeholder to apply the best sustainability practice using principle of Equator World Bank rules, start the relationship transparently with the community and local public administration, prioritize the local workforce through the capability, our employees working together as the ambassador of good principles, and be a pleasant company since the arrival. I mean, be welcome on the company. I think this is just some advice for who wants to develop mineral projects in Brazil, but we believe that the mining acting really as a development driver for this region. Talking a little bit about COVID, I think Luis asked me to just mention about COVID, just a quick overview. We designed a plan, a strategic plan, then we have the green and yellow and orange and red line. Last year, we stay producing during our year, although the COVID problems, and we finalized the year with a 92% of our production targets. And I think it was a successful plan, but it's including everything and all actions to avoid the risk and to include protocols to avoid COVID in our employees and make them safe. Here is the number, just a score of COVID in OZ Minerals. We have today 822 employees, and we have 148 employees that have already contracted COVID. We don't have any case of that. We have 2 cases that the employees needed the intensive care support, but we think that we have this problem or this challenge that COVID at the company under control, but of course, running all the time the protocols and the procedures and reinforce with our employees the importance to keep safe, to make the production and to keep it there, the company running. And for the end, I think the highlights of Brazil, OZ Mineral bets on Brazil. We are developing 5 mineral projects simultaneously. We trust in its ability, OZ Minerals trust in its ability to accelerate projects based on its track record. We received the Pedra Branca installation license this week. We are very happy because it was a trigger point for us to keep running and commissioning Pedra Branca on surface because we have already the installation license for underground. We are developing the decline, but we needed to build the facilities and the beneficiation plant under the surface. We have a favorable environment, brings a vote of confidence in Brazil. Brazil mineral sector, I think it needs new mining companies to accelerate regional sustainable development, diversify its economy and reduce inequalities. I'm also would like also to say thanks for Vale Group, because Vale allow us to be today working at Carajás province. I think we have some opportunities in developing small projects, small scale mining at Carajás province, and it's a modern view, it's a modern mining view, and I think it should be replicated for all the companies as well. I think this is my message for the PDSA. I would like to thank you, everybody, and Luis, it's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you very much. Very interesting to know more about OZ views and what OZ has been doing. Our next panelist is Mike Hodgson from Serabi Gold. I think Mike, can you join us? Hello, good morning, Mike.
Hi, Luis.
I pass the word to you, and please welcome.
Thank you very much, Luis. Yes, thank you, Luis, for the introduction, and I echo the words of the previous speakers, Carolina, for organising this in the strangest of years and the oddest of PDACs, and Roberto as well. So very pleased to actually have the opportunity to talk to you about Serabi and what we're doing at the moment. I think the picture there, the slide there, shows us what we're about. We're an underground miner, and that's our specialization. And we actually have the Palito mine. I'll just.
Sorry, I have the control here. Let me know.
Okay, so maybe I can. Do you want to give me the screen, or? That's fine. Well, maybe I can just say next slide to you, and you can do the slides for me. Thank you. Okay, there's. I think this slide actually shows tells our story. We're in the northern part of Brazil, in Pará state there, and we actually have our platform for our business is the Palito mine, which has been in production now for about 6 or 7 years. Stable production, doing 40,000 ounces. A high-grade underground gold mine, which is quite unusual in Brazil, as underground mining is not that prevalent. But we've successfully built an industry there and made a nice modern mine, 40,000 ounces. We put in some ore sorting technology, which has been working absolutely terrifically well, which is going to allow us to go to 50,000 ounces. And the real value proposition with Sarabi going forward is the development of Coringa. Coringa is a project which we bought, an advanced project, which we bought about 2 years ago. And it is a very similar deposit to Palito. It's just down the road. It's also in the Tapajos. It's a high-grade underground project, which we're ready to develop. And I think for us, the value proposition for Sarabi as well going forward is Coringa is going to allow us to double our production. We'll go from our current 40, 50,000 ounces to nearly 100,000 ounces by bringing Coringa on stream. The really good thing about Coringa is it is advanced in terms of permitting. It's got a BFS and a PEA on it, and the process plant is actually already at the site. So actually it just needs assembly. And we're working our way through our final stages of permitting to actually construct that. And actually mining wise, we actually already have the mining license. So we will actually commence the underground development there at Coringa in the next 2 or 3 months. So doubling of production. And on top of that, we've got some really good exploration potential in and around, particularly our Palito area, the current mine. And so I'll be talking briefly about that. And this year, we would have last year done a 30,000 meter drill program. But unfortunately, the pandemic impacted on that. So it kind of got shelved. But this year, we've just started that exploration program. So we have an exploration program going on, which is going to be very, very attractive. And as I said, the value proposition is going from 40,000 ounces through 100,000 ounces in the next 2 years is clearly what Sarabi is targeting. Next slide, please, Caroline. A little bit about the Tapajos. Now, this is an area which we've always found very exciting, and I think it's our commitment to this region which has probably stood us in good stead. On that particular image there, you'll see the dotted red outline is the actual Tapajos province. And inside it, the red polygons is Sarabi's assets. So the upper one is the Palito complex, where we actually have our current operation, producing that 40, 50,000 ounces. And Coringa is down the road there, down the federal BR 163, and it's a very similar project. As I say, we're linked by a paved road. And the Tapajos, I guess, and one of Lewis's questions to me at the beginning to talk about with Sarabi is, how's a company, a junior company like Sarabi, managed to sort of survive and prosper in a fairly remote region? Well, one of the points is that we've seen this region evolve a lot in the last 10 years. The main road now, which used to be a really difficult access, is now paved. We've seen power improvement coming up the road. We've seen with that infrastructural developments coming, which is a lot of it has come from the soya traffic coming from the south of Brazil to the Amazon. We've seen these improvements, and you'll see on that map too there quite a few other colors, and the green areas is Anglo-American, and Anglo-American have come into the Tapajos, as have Nexa, looking for large-scale projects. The whole thing about the Tapajos, and always has been, is this 30 million ounces of artisanal gold that's been mined in that top 20 meters of soil, the saprolite. And the disconnection is the fact that only 10 million ounces of hard rock resource has actually been discovered to date. So clearly that's something you'd expect a lot of hard rock resource to be found, and those companies have come here as such. Anglo-American clearly with the view that with their success that they had in Alta Floresta finding porphyry gold type mineralization means that the Tapajos is not only ripe for high-grade vein mineralization we are mining, but they also see it as potentially for porphyry gold mineralization as well. So that's certainly why they're there. So it's very good to have them as good neighbors. Next slide, please. Now, ESG. Now, I think this has been really, really key to us. And I think our commitment to the region of the Tapajos and Para has been really, really very important. As you can see there in the second part under social, most of our employees are local, very local. And we obviously, with a lot of people working locally, we recycle a lot of money in terms of salaries and have lots of indirect jobs in the region as well. And I think that commitment that we've had in the local region has really bode well for us to actually move forward with the permitting of Coringa. Coringa is obviously, we've been working our way through the permitting. We acquired it with an EIA on it. We moved forward and a BFS, but since we acquired it, we actually decided, we took the opportunity, we'd already been looking at filtration and dry stacking of tailings at Palito, and we decided, obviously with the challenges of tailings dams and the new legislation that was coming in, we, being a small high-grade operation, it was absolutely made for filtration, and we could just take the whole tailings dam debate off the table. So we actually changed the flow sheet and put in a filtration and dry stacking methodology in the EIA, which we resubmitted, and in a subsequent PEA. And that went down very well. We had our public hearing last year during the pandemic. We actually managed to get that done, which was great. Unanimous stakeholder support in the local community. And I think that all comes from our very good relationships that we have with the environmental agency in the state of Pará and with the ANM as well. So clearly moving forward, and that resulted in us getting our licencia previa in October last year, and we are working our way towards the installation license to assemble that process plant that's actually already sitting at Coringa waiting to be assembled. So we're certainly in a good place regarding that. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the operation, Palito itself. It's a very simple, high-grade underground vein mine. You can see there, the picture there. You can see the secret to this type of mining is simply dilution control and selective mining. That's it. You can see there a photograph of one of the miners there, and you can see the pink side rocks, and you can see the vein there in the middle, which is a high-grade sulfide vein. And this is why, so dilution control in the mining process is really key. And then of course, because whatever you mine is then come to the process plant. So our methodology is selective mining. It's open stoping underground. The rock conditions are very good. We've actually got our constraint at Palito has been for a long time the processing size, 500 tons per day. So what this enabled us to do last year was to actually work with the University of Porto Alegre and with COMEX, who are our German producer of ore sorters, to look at ore sorting technology, and it worked very well. And that allows us to actually remove what waste rock we cannot remove in the mining process. It can be removed before it goes to the process plant. So we actually moved forward with that last year. Unfortunately, I think as Carlos said about OZ Minerals, we didn't manage to produce the ounces we wanted to do last year. We had a very good year still, but you can see there in the bottom left-hand corner, we're sort of doing about 40,000 ounces for the last 5 years. Last year, we were around 8,000 ounces short. That was really due to a very Q2 and Q3 where we actually had to reduce the workforce. We are a camp. We don't have miners going home at night. So in a way, it's good and it's bad. We decided that we actually wanted to simplify the camp, give people space, socially distance, and while we were trying to work out and get our way through the pandemic, implement testing, etc. So for about sort of 4 or 5 months, we actually had a very reduced workforce with almost like a skeleton working crew. But despite that, we still produced nearly 80% of our budget last year. And in fact, the improved gold price and the preferential exchange rate meant from our cash position, we actually ended the year with a better cash balance than we actually thought. I'll just say about COVID in a way, as I said, because we're a camp, I think our remoteness actually played into our hands. I mean, we were in a controlled environment. So I think a lot of the mining industry, and I was very impressed with a lot of producers in Brazil, how quickly we all got to grips with the COVID situation and the pandemic and introduced testing really quickly, changed working conditions very quickly. And I think, seemingly got through the pandemic very well, I think. And I think most companies seem to be fairly regularized within about 3 months, including us. So I think we should applaud ourselves for how well we actually managed to get through that. Next slide, please, Carolina. Now, Coringa, very similar deposit to Palito. This is our opportunity to double our production. In terms of scale, very similar, 500,000 ounce resource. It's nearly build ready. We actually have the underground mining license ready. So, and actually, what I can say today, which isn't unfortunately in this presentation, we've actually just managed to conclude and complete a financing which we closed last week for $17.5 million. And a big part of that is actually to go towards the final acquisition payment of this asset and begin the underground mine. So we will see Coringa underground development starting before the end of Q2 this year. It's going to be a very similar deposit to Palito, and as I say, it's a very low risk, low capex doubling of production. The team that built Palito will be the same team that's going to build Coringa. $25 million to put it into production. So it's a very cheap build. And as I say, the one big factor there is the process plant is already actually at site. It came from the Andorinhas mine, Reinadas mine in Pará too. So again, the most of that capex is underground development for the next 12 months. So as I say, we plan to start that in May, June this year and get the mine going. And you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner, the project economics. It's very, very good. I mean, at today's price, let's say consensus price, you can see that exchange rate's a little higher than 5, but with a sort of $1,700 an ounce gold price, the rate of return on this project is 85%. So it's a very attractive proposition to us, and we'll certainly double our production and reduce our all-in sustaining cost to below $1,000 an ounce. So it'll make us a nice high margin producer. Next slide, please. I just want to talk a little bit about Coringa. Again, on the upside, you can see there on the left-hand side the mining license in the red polygon, and you'll see inside it a sort of trace, a brown trace. That's actually the strike of the vein trace of what's called the Coringa trend, which is the deposit, the trend, the fault, let's say, that was being mined by the garimpeiros. This deposit saw 300,000 ounces of gold produced out of it by the garimpeiros, and in fact, they didn't mine the entire length of that zone. They just mined essentially sort of sections along it. And the resource today that we have here of 500,000 ounces is, as often is the case in the Tapajós, it's just where drilling has been done underneath the garimpo pits, the artisanal pits. So there's a lot of information gaps and a lot of opportunity to actually drill between the actual garimpos and actually increase the resource. And if you look on the right-hand side, since we acquired the property, we actually did a soil geochemistry and geophysics program over the top, and you can see there's a series of parallel trends which look every bit as prospective as the actual trend where the ounces at the current resource actually is. So I think the takeaway from this is there's a lot of upside to actually increase the geological resource at Coringa and therefore the reserve. And this is important because the process plant that we've actually got at Coringa is double the size to what the current mine plan requires. So we've got plant capacity, so we're well placed if we have more exploration success to actually add more production ounces. Next slide, please. And again, please. Now, back to Palito, the other part of our story, which we've, so simplistically, Palito in production, steady state platform for the company, Coringa doubling our production. The third layer of our story is our exploration. And this is possibly the most exciting part of all. Sarabi, what we're looking at there is the actual exploration tenement of Palito, what we call the Palito complex, which is principally the two brown boxes or the mining licenses of the Palito mine itself, where we've got the Palito underground deposit and the process plant and all the infrastructure. And today we have this satellite deposit called Sao Chico, where we actually truck some ROM from there directly to the Palito plant, where the two deposits basically feed the plant with the best 500 tons per day. What we know inside our tenement here, we've got a huge amount of opportunity. And just quickly, what I want to describe here is if you look at that sort of polygon, that 60,000 hectare polygon, we've got in there a series of geological data sets. The colors you see in the background is a magnetic airborne survey we did in 2018. And on top of that, and you'll see the colors, so the blue colors are less magnetic, but you'll see in the central part there, this really sort of long east-west striking zone of warmer colors, which is the white and the yellows and the greens, and that's a magnetic anomaly. And overlying that, you will see there are some contours, and they're geochemical anomalies of copper and gold. And the little black dots you see everywhere are electromagnetic anomalies, again, geophysical anomalies from the airborne survey, which are probably indicators of sulfides, which again, in the Tapajós is where the gold is hosted. So simplistically put, there's almost an overwhelming amount of opportunities, targets, prospects, anomalies here. And when Anglo-American actually came to the Tapajós, they saw what we're doing here, and they saw those magnetic highs such as this as being extremely promising for porphyry gold type mineralization, and that's exactly what they're doing. And I think one of the nicest things is that now they're taking our template for exploration, which we've done in the Tapajós here, and they're doing the same, flying airborne geophysics, I'm particularly looking for magnetic anomalies like this. So we've got this wonderful anomaly in the center of our property, and that's going to play a big part in our exploration effort going forward in the next 12 months. But we're actually going to focus in 4 main areas, and you can see there, zooming in. So yeah, next slide, please, Carolina. Yes, so on that slide there, you'll see the 4 areas we're focusing on exploration at the moment is Palito, around the Palito mine. Very straightforward resource growth. We've actually got our ore bodies at Palito. The actual ore body we're mining at Palito is open along strike. It's open laterally. There's a lot of scope to actually increase the resource there very cheaply and very quickly and without much, a very straightforward program. Similarly, down at Salchica, where we've got our satellite mine, again, the ore body is open along strike with a lot of prospectivity, basically in all directions. So they're very straightforward. São Domingos is an area which we actually acquired in the last 12 months. We really didn't have any systematic exploration over that, but that is actually a really rich and very exciting, active area of garimpos and garimperos working today, producing some remarkable grades. So we've actually bought that purely almost for the, acquired that purely for the garimpo activity and what we might be able to find there. And you'll see in the center there, this final area called Calico. So the first 3, Palito, Salchico, and São Domingos, are probably exploring, looking for the same type of mineralization that we're mining today. Calico is a little bit different. This is an area where we're actually, we're doing our first exploration where we've got coincidental geochemistry, geophysical, airborne, and terrestrial anomalies, where we're going to get on the ground and about to drill. And we think we've got the opportunity, the possibility that we're going to be able to find a deposit of more scale, so rather than just continuing finding the high-grade vein mineralization, which we've been focusing on up to today, I think we've got the opportunity of finding a more of a bulk deposit at surface, which could have some sort of scale and mechanized mining. Next slide, please. And just to talk through this quickly, you'll see there just at Palito, you can see the actual, give you an idea, the mining license is in that yellow box. Those little red lines are actually the vein traces. And I think you can see to the south there, the way the vein traces probably extend nearly 3 kilometers, this area called Curatella. And you can just see from the, I won't go into detail, but you see on some of those text boxes, some of the grades that we've actually got to the south of the resource and even towards Curatella. You can see lots of grades, 20, 40 grams per ton, 29. So very rich, high-grade vein mineralization. So we've got a very good opportunity to actually extend the ore body to the south and actually double or 3 times the resource here at Palito. And on the next slide, we'll see a similar story at Salchico. Again, it's a property that's actually just enveloped by anomalies and intersections. And we've opened this mine 4 years ago on 17 drill holes. We had about 100 meters of depth and 100 meters of strike. The mine's now 600 meters long in terms of strike. It's nearly 300 meters depth. And we've actually now got drill holes going for another 400 meters to the west. And beyond that, we've got those geophysical anomalies you can see there on that map. So a lot to play for here, a lot of upside. And certainly we're going to be spending a lot of effort on that this year, trying to actually turn these anomalies into discoveries and into resource growth and moving forward. And on the next slide, we can see the area I was talking about, São Domingos. This is immediately to the west of Salchico, and it kind of is inside the Salchico story. Early days, but this is an area that has seen an intensive effort, a lot of garimpero mining here. And the one area in the center there, you'll see this is a 600-meter long zone that's actually got a lot of garimpo activity on it, and basically 3 pits that were mining something like a 20-meter wide structure. And you'll see that one in the center called Tucano, which actually we did channels over it just in the new year. We returned 18 meters at 12 grams, nearly 13 grams per ton. So that's quite a different story to the high-grade vein mines we've been mining at Palito and Salchico. And we've drilled underneath that pit 100 meters depth, and we got 25 grams over 5 meters. So not as wide as 18, but certainly still pretty wide. So what we're looking at here is to drill out that sort of 600-meter strike length. And certainly if that all hangs together and we actually get the consistency that we've got in that section along the length of it, we're looking at a very significant discovery in terms of ounces and ounces at surface. which again could be a potential open pit target for us. And on the next slide, it comes together why we're really doing all of this. What we've actually got at Palito and Sao Chico is a 500,000 ounce resource, which we're trying to obviously grow to actually increase our production. So I think with the obviously the build of Coringa and putting that into production, and that's a state of basically going through the final stage of permitting with the installation license and getting Palito built over the next 18 months. And then again, with the organic growth opportunity, I think at Palito that we've actually got, and at Sao Chico to increase our production there, we've got a very promising story. And I think our commitment to the area of Pará has certainly allowed us to sort of move forward. And I think between the further growth that we've ultimately got at Coringa and at Palito, we're certainly going to be hoping that our Coringa growth and regional exploration can get our resource base up to 3 million ounces from the 1 million we are today. So I think that's really my story. Thank you very much, Luis. Thank you everyone for listening, and Carolina. And thank you for working the slides for me, Carolina. Excellently done.
Mike, thank you very much. For sure, it's a lot of work. It's almost 30 years, right? In that area. I'm sure we're going to have questions and we're going to talk a lot more about this. Our next panelist is Miles Thompson, CEO at Lara Exploration, which you're going to speak about investments opportunity in iron and copper. Miles, please.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity. Obviously, we're the P for prospectors in PDAC, very much an exploration company. We were listed in Canada in 2006, so we've been gradually building a portfolio, predominantly in Brazil and Peru since that time. We're spread today roughly 50-50 between Brazil and Peru. So in Brazil, which obviously is more interest today, we've made so far 3 copper discoveries at Liberdade with Codelco, and then a smaller one with Codelco at what we now call Celesta, and a more recent discovery at Planalto, which we're developing with Capstone. We also have a few royalties in Brazil at Fofoca South, Vertical, and Conceição de Tocantins. And we have in our kind of exploration portfolio as well a vanadium prospect in the Tapajós, which we call Itaituba. And on the Peru side, we have a copper porphyry in a joint venture with Minsor, a gold-silver discovery with Hochschild, and some zinc prospects that we're working ourselves. So we work really as a portfolio. We consider ourselves to be prospectors and explorationists with a goal to deliver projects for mining companies. So typically we will acquire ground, we'll do early stage work, and we'll try to joint venture them with a mining company to do the development. We don't have the ambition to be buying big yellow trucks ourselves. At the moment, we obviously have various different projects in different levels of development. The other thing that makes us a little bit different is that we're not commodity specific. We have a preference for copper and gold, but over the years we've worked a number of other commodities as opportunities have arisen. We have obviously an iron ore project, we have a vanadium play, we participate in a phosphate project in Chile. So it's quite varied, and it depends a little bit on what opportunities are available to us. We will typically aim to end up with a minority interest and or a royalty at the end of the process, hopefully with a credible mining and operating company to develop and build. So looking at a little bit more detail in Brazil, obviously we're working ourselves as operator at Planalto, which is a copper discovery we made in 2018, close to Canão dos Carajás. We've just signed a deal with Anglo American to extend that potentially for another 1,500 meters of strike, and we're getting geared up to do 4,000 or 5,000 meters of drilling starting in the next quarter. At Celesta, this was an exploration property. We joint ventured with Codelco, did not find a large deposit, but we did find some high-grade breccias, and we've now developed those with private Brazilian and Canadian investors, with project finance provided by Ocean Partners in exchange for offtake. So quite a innovative finance to build that, and that just started production last year, and we hope to achieve full production around about the middle of this year. And then with Liberdade, this was a project that we staked the ground and did exploration with Codelco. Unfortunately, there's some question on the title, so that's in a case being discussed and resolved between Codelco now and Vale. So moving to Planalto, this is where we're most active in Brazil at the moment. And rather than sort of dwell an awful lot on the exploration results, a little bit talking to why we're there and why we like it. And I think when you're going out exploring and looking to do things in the mining business these days, given the complexities of achieving ESG principles and social license, you really have to think about where you're working. So in southern Pará, in the Carajás district, we're in an area obviously with a number of mining companies, principally Vale. We're close to the Carajás camp with Vale's main iron ore mines, but also in the same district as their Sossego copper mine and their Cristalino development project. And obviously we have as neighbors as well, OZ Minerals with Antas Norte and Pedra Branca. And you can just see our own part-owned Celesta mine just to the north there. So this is an area with paved highways, high tension electricity power lines fed by hydroelectric power, obviously the Vale railway lines, and communities of Parapebas and Canal Carajás with well-trained and well-educated people accustomed to mining, both from a work point of view and comfortable with it in their environment. And a lot of the land we work in these days is predominantly grazing. So from an environmental standpoint, fairly straightforward to permit. And I discussed actually on Friday a little bit, these days, a lot of the permitting, a lot of the regulatory organs are devolved to the municipality and state level. So we're able to work quite closely with the regulatory authorities, which I think simplifies things greatly. I mean, they're able to come to us if there's something they're not happy about, and we're able to find somebody to talk to solve our problems rather than a faceless bureaucracy. So we've done a few campaigns of drilling at Homestead, which was our main discovery, and we've got extensions to that. It's open to the east, west, and south and southeast, which we're looking at the moment. And more interestingly, we were able to acquire licenses to the north, which double the strike length. So we're planning, obviously subject to the limitations of permitting, to be drilling here April, May time. You can just see the warmer colors here are copper and soil anomalies. The little green triangles are outcropping or subcropping rock with sulfides. So we're pretty confident we can grow this. And we'll obviously be working as the year progresses. At Celesta, again, we've started producing here on a small scale. This plant is in the process of doubling in size. This is the Osmar 1 pit. Again, it's working a high-grade IOCG breccia. Our reported resource on this is about 2 million tons of 4% copper. We're doing a cutback on this at the moment, and we should be mining again by April. This you can see here just a little bit of an overview. There's Osmar 1, there's our plant. We've got 2 more targets here, Galpon and Osmar 2. We elected over the end of the year to develop Osmar 2 because we have more sulfide material coming to surface, which blending with Osmar 1 improves our recoveries. It's just some of the drill results we've released. Quite high grade sulfide bodies. And here's the top of the pit when we opened it up in January. Liberdade, again, an open pit target, quite long intercepts from surface. Obviously, we're waiting for the courts and the A&M to resolve the title issues, figure out how and with who we move this forward. And then the other project that we're working in Brazil is in the Tapajós region. This was an area we found prospecting, outcropping magnetites with titanium and vanadium. And we did a little bit of drilling in 2019, and we encountered not only those bodies, but also disseminated magnetite and vanadium in the surrounding gabbros. So this is a project that we'll go back and drill later this year once we finish the program at Planalto. On the Peru side, I won't go into as much detail here. I mean, I guess we have more exploration ground in Peru because it's been easier to acquire ground in Peru than it has been to get it in Brazil. And probably my main concern with Brazil has always been the lack of availability of exploration ground, or the ability to go out and claim ground to do grassroots exploration. But it would seem that with the invigoration of the whole process with the ANM and the promise now to get the auctions going and get ground released, that will change. And I look forward to doing a lot more exploration in Brazil in the coming years as ground becomes available. So again, that's what I wanted to say today. So I'll hand it back to you, Luis.
Well,
Sorry, Luis, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
Well, Paulo, actually, my first question would be for you. I always thought that a private equity is a difficult mandate because normally the timelines of their investments do not correspond to their mandates. So, Paulo, you representing a private equity with a defined return period for shareholders and having mining being a typically long-term business, how is to operate in Brazil, which has been marked by time-complex country? What can you tell us is your key to develop these two complex projects? Because no doubt, but Mirabela was at some point one of the most important nickel mines in the world, and you just returned to operation. And actually, I do believe the challenges still be there, and also at the same time developing Arapiraca, which is a big project with the non-usual metallurgical products, which sometimes is very good because you're going to be producing a basket of materials, which is a natural hedge, but it's complicated. And on top of that, Brazil is actually not a very easy country to operate like Canada and Australia. So what do you think in this matter can be done in Brazil to facilitate your lives, to improve your challenges in Appia dealing with these two projects? Please.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, Luis. This is a fantastic, it's, as you said, it's a basket of questions, right? I mean, so we'll tackle them as well as we can. Look, let me start by making a point that I failed to mention in the beginning of our conversation. Appian Capital Advisory is indeed a private equity firm. It is a private equity firm focused in mining. We just closed our second round of funding, very successful and all that. But one thing that I failed to say is that the only reason that Appian has been successful as a private equity firm, it's because there is a very, very good understanding of mining. Everyone on the fund has been working all their lives in mining, often advising big mining firms, but also working for mining firms. I mean, our board is made up of a former chairman of BHP Billiton, of the former CFO of Xstrata, and many, I mean, the technical director of Anglo American. Anyway, very, very good, strong technical input. But to the point you made, more importantly than pretty much everything else, people understand the cycle, right? So unlike other private equity firms, there is not that pressure to say, look, in 2 years, you need to flick this asset and make the returns to our shareholders, to our investors. There's no such thing. There is, of course, the pressure of a typical private equity firm in terms of constant monitoring, KPIs, all these things. But many of us in the modern mining world are more than used to that, right? So the terms and the timing that Appian would be holding an asset could be as long as 7 years, perhaps 10 years. That's the agreement with our investors. So we are just very intelligent in picking the right projects where we believe we can add value, in the typical value chain, from licensing to legal to mining to metallurgy, or even to shipping in some cases, logistics. And then we implement a plan. So that is tackling the first part of your question. The second part of your question, Luis, which is fantastic, but as always, I can only tell you and the audience my experience. And I have to confess that in my experience, the challenges that I had with Brazilian projects, be it with Appian or with someone else, are not different to challenges that I had in other jurisdictions I worked, right? I have worked in North America, which is very easy in certain aspects and very difficult in other aspects. I have worked in Southern Africa, again, easy on certain aspects, difficult on others. I have worked in Central Africa, in Australia, in Chile, in Argentina, in Venezuela, in Ireland. So what I'm saying is, personally, I don't think that the challenges that I have seen here in Brazil are too different from others I've seen. What I have seen, Luis, and I think it tackles the point you made around what is it that's happening in Santa Rita, formerly Mirabela, and what is it that's happening at Serrote, at Mineração Vale Verde, is that we have been able to step back, review the operating model, review the strategic planning, review the strategy around construction, and actually do it properly, right? And what happened with Mirabela, it's exactly that. We had the mandate and the total latitude. And I think it's a point that Carlos mentioned, right? I think all of us here in this call have been involved, with larger firms, with medium-sized firms, and with smaller mining firms. And we all have our calluses and our scars in our backs of, experiences where, you thought you had a mandate. And again, I can only speak for myself, that you thought you had a mandate, but then you don't have the mandate. So, what we have now here in Appian is total latitude to step back, to replan, to rethink, and actually do things properly. So to give you a bit of a sneak preview, we have ramped up Mirabela, right? The former Mirabela, Atlantic Nickel now. We are close to capacity. We are producing at low costs. We are producing top quality concentrate, and we are meeting all the expectations of our shareholders. And why is that? Because we had the ability to step back, to look at the strategies that had been applied, apply new strategies, look at the operating model, look at all these other things, and then do it properly with the latitude, taking full responsibility and all that sort of stuff. Leaving the work to the people that know what they're doing, right? And if they're not, if they're not doing, we have incentives and processes that people have to be leaving the organization. So to me, that's the most important thing. Now, we at Appian have been very fortunate to have been involved here in Brazil with 2 assets that have been very well looked after, right? So that is a big tick in our boxes. But having said that, Luis, we wouldn't get into those assets if we didn't have those boxes ticked, right? So for instance, with Serrote, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, all the work that the team had done, the previous owner had done in terms of engaging with the communities, doing it properly and all this sort of stuff, so that you don't have to redo things that are often very difficult to do again, particularly when it comes to relationship with stakeholders and all these sort of things. And I think all of us in this call know, previous experiences. Carlos and I shared a couple of difficult experiences where we got assets that were very difficult to fix because of previous work, right? So to wrap up, the timing of private equity in mining can only work if people understand the business, right? Not dissimilar if you and I decided to open a baker shop, right? I mean, if you and I decided to open a baker shop, we would have to speak with a couple of bakers, right? Because we've been working all our lives in mining. So not dissimilar, yes, we are a private equity firm with people that have been doing mining all their lives. So that is matched. Number two, again, not an easy place to work, but in my experience, the challenges that we have are not too dissimilar to other jurisdictions. To the contrary, I think we have fantastic people, we have fantastic opportunities. What we do have to keep in mind is to make sure that we do things properly and we do things once, right? So I hope I covered your points.
Yes, but I'll come back to you with a further questions to talk more about what you just said, and I think you covered perfectly my points at this point. Carlos, you and Paulo basically share good experience with previous, let's say, big companies. Paulo is basically Anglo-American, and now he had experience with Appian. You came from Vale, Anglo, and now in Oz Minerals. These are two traditional companies, and with I would say, very good background, but also companies that reinvented themselves recently by different reasons. But Oz is a different company. Oz was born in this new environment. Oz is adopt I think the mandate to, in Australia, not be in the same group of the traditional companies, but be different, be modern. And we all saw that. So as a modern company and innovative like us, what are the biggest difficulties that you have faced most to apply these principles of us in the Brazilian environment? What are favorable in the us disciplines and what are unfavorable to achieve here in Brazil? What is I would say, to summarize, what is your fatal flaws? What are the fatal flaws ahead of you? And again, like I asked it to Carlos, and that's what I want to ask Paulo later, like what can you believe needs to be improved in Brazil to make your life easier?
Okay, Luis, thank you for the question. I think I will try to answer in general, then I'm going to be specific about Oz Minerals. But as Paulo said, I think Brazil has a very good, favorable resource. We know that we have undiscovered resource still in Brazil. I think that we have to join the pillars of good resource, finance capability, skilled team, and working in an environment with low risks in terms of environmental and mining, especially in mining, and institutional as well. I think we joined it in Brazil. Just a briefing and talking about Oz Minerals. When Oz Minerals came to, let's say, Oz Minerals was an Australian mining company, and then they decided on the strategy and the pipeline of investments to become a global copper player and invest in overseas. And they was trying to invest in other countries, but they decided to invest in Brazil. They bet on Brazil. There is a reason for this. As I mentioned before, we have all elements to make a good mining or a profitable mining company in Brazil. I think in terms of Oz Minerals, for them, that in terms of environment to work in Oz Minerals, I think it's a very good environmental. As you mentioned, I have worked in other big mining companies. And the difference, I think, in terms of Oz Minerals as a medium mining company is that the ability and the agility that we have to take decisions, to take fast decisions. I think we are a small team in the executive committee when we can decide fast. And I think this is a favorable thing. And unfavorable is that you mentioned, and Paulo mentioned as well, about the timeline to the things happens in Brazil. I think we have some overtime in licensing process, but it's not in my perspective, it's not a failure of the agencies, but it's complex, and there is a complex situation, and there is maybe a few people or not skilled people to taking care of specific about one project or other project. There are lots of projects on the table, and the guys has to deal with lots of let's say requesting for different companies, and this is one thing that I think it's a little bit unfavorable, but at the same time what we try to make it let's say to keep the motivation in investing in Brazil is to be transparent with the shareholders and to define exactly and to share with them all the steps that we are moving on to developing projects in Brazil. And sometimes it's not easy to do a bad news in terms of postponing in 6 months a project or postponing the decision to keep going with engineering to hire a scoping study or pre-feasibility study or whatever, because we have a lack of information, or we have some restrictions in terms of permission, landowner access, and things like that. This, I think, it's not a particular problem for Brazil. I think this is a problem in general for the mining sector. What we needed to have is we needed to have a skilled team with working in different disciplines together and aligned with the 5 stakeholders, and be transparent in giving nothing always good news, but giving bad news as well.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Thank you very much. We'll come back to that in a little bit later. Well, our next question is to Mike Hodgson. Mike, like we discussed before this section, how I see Serabi. Serabi for me is a typical representative of the British explorers, let's say. Serabi arrived here in the middle of the 90s, decided to open a mine in the middle of a gold town, Itaituba. Many companies tried to do that. Big companies, small companies, Barrick, you just mentioned Anglo, Rio Tinto was there for 10 years. Most of them failed. It's a fact. There is no doubt that there is gold in the Tapajós. It's one of the most attractive areas around the world. But how can you define was the Serabi, let's say, secret? What do you think can be done to facilitate to other companies that arrive in Tapajós? And I think you share the feeling that more company means more opportunities. A good example is Carajás. The presence of many companies improved the infrastructure that, like Carlos said before. So you would be willing to see more companies back to Tapajós. And as final questions, we have been talking a lot about Garimpo in the last few months and probably in the last years. Do you believe that the Garimpos can be moved to a different stage, can become micro companies, or what is the solution for the Garimpo situation? Because until the Garimpo persists in Brazil, there is a feeling over Brazil that we do not care about environmental. So we don't consider that it's appropriate to eliminate garimpos, but to improve the garimpos. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, that's a big question. Excellent question, Luis. First of all, talk a little bit about the garimperos, and I think one of the problems that the smaller company faces, particularly, is I think certainly in the north of Brazil, and Brazil being dominated by a lot of larger companies, there seems to be a lot of large companies and then small companies, and they tend to get sort of put in the same bin as the garimperos. And I think this is quite often the permitting challenges as well. And there is this, I think it's probably one of the reasons juniors have actually struggled so much in Brazil, that they tend to be characterized as, if you're not a big company or a medium-sized company, you won't perform with good standards, you won't perform with good ESG, etc., and you're going to leave a lot of liability behind, etc. So it's hard to shake off that reputation. I think we have fortunately done that, and I think we've earned a lot of with our longevity in Pará, in the Tapajós. We've earned a lot of good friends, and I think now that's been borne out, as I said in my presentation, by our success with Coringa. We've kind of been there in the trenches, working away at Palito for a long time, and I think we've demonstrated by the various visits we've actually had from the environmental agencies, from the mining agencies, from INCRA and various people. They've come to Palito, and they've realized you don't have to be big to be good. You can be a small mining company and still be very, perform your duty well and comply and have a good standard, good tailings methodology or whatever. Well, like what we're doing now, we're going to be putting in dry stacking and filtration. We're doing really quite advanced high-tech mining in terms of ore processing, ore sorting we're now using, and filtration of process plants. So and we always get very, very pleasant accolades when these various people come to our project. So that's helped enormously, and I really think that's been one big plus in us actually, since we're getting Coringa, we took a situation that was actually quite complex from the permitting perspective, and we're now, as you know, Luis, we're making real progress there. So that's been great news. In terms of the garimperos, can they become a sort of micro company and an organized micro company? Well, my personal view is where we are in my experience of the garimperos around in the Tapajós where we are. I think they could, yes. They're not in enormous numbers. They do seem pretty organized. And there does seem to be, we've never had an issue with these guys working against the company. They've always been working with the company. And certainly people always ask me, investors always ask me, I think they always see garimperos and they think of Serra Pelada and they think of, how these guys are just going to be an absolute nightmare for you. And we haven't found that. I mean, I found them to be, well, as we all know, terrific explorationists. But maybe in our part of Brazil and the Tapajós, there's such opportunity, they never stay very long in the same place. So they find enough, they help you, and they move on. So we've never really had a conflict with them at all. So I, for one, don't really want to see the back of them. I think if they can be organized and shake off this environmental sort of bad reputation that they have, it'll be good. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the mining industry is all over the world, is terrible at defending its position and in terms of, we kind of accept liability so much, and yet we all know other industries like farming, etc., get away with a lot, and the mining industry is always the one that gets the blame for leaving the mess. And usually it is the domestic mining that actually does do that. So it would be good for that to be policed a lot more. But as I say, your first question about how have we managed to prosper in the Tapajós and exist so long, why so many have not done so well. Carla said something very telling there about agility in thinking. And we've all worked with big companies, small companies. I've chosen to work for a small company for most of my life because that word I like, agility, and quick. You are, we say in English, you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. Everybody knows a little bit about everything. And I think that's the ability to actually make decisions quickly and not have to go through this enormous chain of command and come all the way down. And I think it is being versatile and making quick decisions, which helps. And certainly at Polito or Sarabi, that's been our success. Now, we weren't always a complete success story, as you know. You know, in the early years, my predecessors came to the Tapajos, did a very tough job in a very tough environment, a much tougher environment than it is today. You know, back then there was no power, the access was terrible. You know, you were dealing with, you know, there were an Australian company coming to Brazil, a lot of challenges. They did some great work to get going, and lost their way. And it was a bit like what Paolo said about Mirabella. You know, we had the opportunity in 2010, 11 to take what had been done on an operation that was shut, brownfield site, and we did a big reboot on the business and started again in a proper way, and took away, basically modernized the whole business and modernized the thinking and brought in proper training and did things on a firm footing as opposed to building everything on quicksand, which had kind of been done before. And I think second time round we've done it. So it's there's been some bumps in the road, Lewis, I'll say that, to get to where we are today. But I think overall it's being small and agile and having the benefit of hindsight has helped a lot. But as I say, I think, you know, I think it's helped us a lot. We've earned our sort of reputation in the Tapajos, I think, with the local authorities, and that's I think a commitment to the region has helped us a lot, certainly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. Well, our next question is to Miles Thompson. Miles is a very discreet man, I would say. He doesn't advertise too much about his company and too much about himself, but we have here a winner of Thayer Lindsley Award in PDAC 2016, which is giving to people that done remarkable things for the mine industry or achieve discoveries or cross some challenges that are considered worldwide very, very important. So what Miles have done is to operate in Serbia, and he defined and find an important copper gold project, Cukaru Peki, and this was sold for $500 million. In other words, Miles, you are with Lara for, I would say, more time than you were in Serbia. So, and you are almost 30 years in Brazil. Since I know geology and mining, I know you, right? We are both getting old.
Yeah, sadly.
Without say our age, why you couldn't achieve that in Brazil? Why you have to go to a country which was almost leaving a war situation with a very large challenges and complexity of ethnic disputes to find a giant project and to make a remarkable transaction? So how do you compare those, let's say, difficulties with the difficulties in Brazil, and why this didn't happen here, which you dedicate much more time?
Yes, that's unfortunate. I wish it had.
We too.
So I think there's a couple of key things. I mean, I guess the sort of question you didn't ask is why I'm still here after 30 years in Brazil.
It's easy. We all love Brazil.
Yeah. But as an explorationist, what you look for first and foremost is prospectivity. Now, I landed in Brazil in the mid-'80s, originally working on oil rigs. I've seen oil and gas. I've seen a little bit of mining, obviously. And the thing that struck me about Brazil was just how rich it was everything you looked at, whether it's farming, oil and gas, mining. And I continue to believe very strongly that Brazil is incredibly prospective and very underexplored. The other, I suppose the big change over this 30 years is just the infrastructure. It's a completely different place to work than when I first arrived. I mean, I used to go to work in a one-engine Cessna plane and wonder each time we took off and landed whether I'd get through it. And you'd be sleeping half the time in a hammock or some wooden shack somewhere. Now you can drive to most places, you stay in a nice hotel with Wi-Fi. The ability to get around and do things in Brazil has improved immeasurably, while the prospectivity is still there and largely untested. So I continue to be very positive about Brazil and continue to work there. However, the real issue is access to land. The reason I went to Serbia was I was able to stake claims or acquire ground close to operating copper mines, where essentially I was doing brownfields exploration. So despite the political risk and the challenges of very much an emerging legal system, the key was the prospectivity of the ground I was able to acquire. And that has always been my frustration with Brazil. So most of the time I worked in Brazil, most of the prospective ground was held by people with really no interest in exploration, just speculating and sitting on ground, sometimes paying the taxes, sometimes not. But most of the ground was tied up and was not being worked. And we've seen a gradual move to improve that. The taxes to hold ground are now implemented. They're now at a more reasonable cost. There is pressure to actually do work before you renew a license. So all of that is gradually improving. But I originally stopped working in Brazil because I couldn't get any decent ground to work. And in recent years, I'm frustrated that ground is not being released. So you have the auction process now just starting up, and I'm optimistic that that will improve. But if there's one thing that has made it very difficult to explore and find anything new in this country, is just the difficulty in putting together a package of land to explore. And I really hope that the promises made by the ANM and the minister do come to fruition, and that we see that backlog of 30, 40,000 disponibilidades is released between now and the middle of next year, and that we see a system where ground becomes available and is turned over if you don't work it, and that moves efficiently. I mean, you still see to this day claims and licenses tied up in bureaucracy, things that are unresolved, perhaps going back decades in some cases. So, there's a real challenge, and I think, to their credit, the ANM are facing it and doing something about it. But that would be what has been most frustrating to me in my long career in Brazil, just access to ground.
Well, you repeat that twice today. You mentioned that in Peru, which has probably 6 times more companies, especially TSX companies, than Brazil, you were able to get more ground than in Brazil. And now you are telling us again that you only were successful in Serbia because you found ground. I hope in the audience, the people, the directors of ANM and also the workforce there are hearing us and understand the importance of these public offers. Well, I think we are on time for the first time in my life moderating a session. I think it's not anything I'm proud. I think you guys really were accurate on time. So I'm gonna open the questions for the audience, and we do have a few questions already here, which I'm gonna start for Paulo Castellari, and a question from José Ricardo Pisani. Paulo, you there?
Yes, I am, Luis.
Okay, well, maybe you all can turn on the camera now, and I'm pretty sure we will enjoy to have all of you here. Paulo, talk about challenges for mining companies to operate in Brazil. Which is the main bottleneck, the mine license and regulation, or the complex environmental legislation?
All right, please. This is thanks, Luis, and thanks, José Ricardo, for the question. Look, I mean, I don't want to be I don't want to sound too optimistic or too positive, but again, I would like to go back and start addressing this question with the comment I made earlier, which is, in my opinion, it's not, in my experience and in my opinion, it's not that licensing, regulation, environmental legislation is more or less difficult than in other jurisdictions. I think at the end, it's the combination that will set the difference. What I think the challenge that we have and I have faced here in Brazil, it's much more around enforcement and execution than on legislation, licensing, and regulation itself. I always say when I meet with international investors and people like yourselves that have operated in different jurisdictions around the world, that there's not a big deal of challenges or problems around the environmental legislation per se, right? I mean, the legislation is there, is sound, the institutions in Brazil are sound, are solid. What I have faced in different stages in my career here in Brazil is that often it's very difficult to make things happen. Be it because the agencies don't have the infrastructure or the systems or even the labor, right? I mean, how many times we had to stop multi-million-dollar projects because there were no representatives to make a site visit, or people that were waiting to get their per diem and it wasn't there because of ABC policies and all this sort of stuff. So to me, the legislation is there and it's up to us, executors, to understand the legislation and plan for it. What I think it's often unfair on the mining companies, small or big, is the fact that the timeline and the ability to track is not always there. So to me, the biggest challenge is really around execution and enforcement. But having said all that, I want to go back to my first point in saying that, I have worked in other jurisdictions where legislation was very simple, but then you didn't have labor, right? Or environmental licenses would be, triggered the day after, in a day's notice, but then you didn't have electricity. So what I'm trying to say is that things are there, right? And I think, if I may go back to our example, something that, Luis, you are familiar with, the Serrote project. This is the first ever mining project in the state of Alagoas, a state that is small, a state that is not wealthy, right? But with all that we know about Brazil, about legislation and all that, with the very good work that the previous owner had done, and the diligence and the seriousness and the process that Appian rolled out, we have been able to license this project very, very nicely, with the same call it framework in many other jurisdictions. What I mean by that is that if there is the will, there is a way, right? So the challenges are there. It's a question of us being ready to execute and ready to be done. And as importantly, I think many of you will be aware that at MVV, we have been able to secure the first ever full non-recourse project financing in that state for a mining company. We have put together a full non-recourse project financing, $140 million, for more or less a little bit more than 50% of the capex of the project, endorsed by top-class international institutions, following IFC standards and all that. So we have done it, right? It is doable. And it's a great example of a state that hadn't done it before, but, worked towards it.
Thank you very much. I think you answered perfectly, Pisani. Well, our next question is from Erica França. And I do think the best person to answer that is Mike Hodgson, because he just mentioned to us that he raised some capital. He saw probably many investors. He had to convince those investors about Serabi and about Brazil. So the question to him is, how is the reputation of Brazil for the international investors at this moment?
Well, from personal experience, Luis, it was good, obviously. Interestingly enough, as you know, around this time last year, we've used this money are using this money to advance our Coringa project, final payments, and to begin the underground. And we tried on numerous occasions last year to test the market, and it was difficult. I think back then we faced a combination of a slightly, well, we obviously had the pandemic. There was, this was before the pandemic really hit off in the first quarter. We were still living the legacy of Brumadinho and the legislation, the new legislation on tailings. So I think it wasn't ready, but I think 1 year on, even after the pandemic and all the struggles every country had, and Brazil not being any different, we found an entirely different attitude. We did have a lot of meetings, admittedly, and in fact, if the gold price hadn't slipped, about 2 weeks ago, I think we would have been very oversubscribed. But as it happened, we were very fortunate. I think we found that well, obviously we've changed our technology a little bit to avoid tailings dams issues, but I think that that sort of legacy has slipped away, and I think people can see costs of production, the strength of the real. Being a gold producer in Brazil these days is excellent. Really, it is. I mean, today I look at the gold price and it's in reais. It's great to be a gold producer in Brazil. So I think this resonated. So the story was very palatable, and I think I'll go one stage further. I think a lot of people can see the value proposition, and they can see the value proposition of junior companies consolidating in Brazil. It's much talked about, potential consolidation, but no one's really moved it forward, and etc. So, but I would say it was very good, and most meetings were, if there were investors that couldn't participate, they really liked the story. The feedback was very good, very positive, very little negative feedback, very positive.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Miles, I won't let you to be the last again. So Erica França also, she had 3 questions. So the next one is for you. She would like to ask, what are the main advantages and benefits and disadvantages, difficulties when investing in mining business in Brazil compared to mining in other countries?
That's a difficult one to answer. I think, business generally is about people. So you invest with people who know what they're doing. So when I look at small companies like my own, I look to see that the people running the company have relevant experience. So, they actually know how to work in Brazil rather than having, worked somewhere else only. And I like to see them owning shares in the company. When you invest in a larger business, you want to see the company run by someone like Paulo or Carlos, who've got decades of experience managing businesses of this type. I think Brazil is imminently investable at this point. If you look at it purely from the Canadian perspective, you've seen, the Lundin Group, you've seen Ross Beatty come in with Equinox, you've seen the success of companies like Ero. There have been plenty of examples of great successes in Brazil that you can buy any day of the week in the stock market. So I don't think it's a question of why you would invest in Brazil. I just think you have to be careful who you invest with. At the end of the day, business is people. You want to look at who runs the company and whether they have relevant experience and the backing to do what they say they're going to do.
Thank you, Miles. Very well answered. Well, Carlos, for you now, and that I think will be the last question from our audience. And what extent the government regulation and policies influence the mining investment in Brazil? Are there other stakeholders who also hold some influence as well? Well, I think it's a very good question for OZ Minerals representative.
No, thanks. It's a good question as well. I think I have mentioned on the beginning of my presentation about Ozway that we consider the 5 stakeholders as a pillar to take the decision and to build our strategy. I think, yes, we have some other stakeholders, and I would include the community and local government. I think Brazil has a cultural heritage that they think on people came here to explore, just to explore our mineral resource and leaving nothing for the local region and community. And I think this has changed since the 90s, I think, but now is strong. The mining companies doing a strong effort to changing this idea. And I think when we talk about sustainable, really sustainable mining company that has in his values the sustainability and consider all stakeholders, I think the thing is different. I think just a short story about when I was developing in a small city a project, a mining project, and I was in a public hearing, and an old lady came to me and said, Carlos, look, the population here in my municipality is reducing too much along the years. There is no perspective for young people. And when the young people became teenager, they move for lack of expectation. They move for big cities. They migrating for big cities, and they go, let's say, to the boundary of the big cities, trying an opportunity. But the competitiveness in the big cities in Brazil is too high, and then normally they lose or they've been frustrated in the end. And then when you came here in the public hearing and presenting the project and the opportunities to keep our young people at the municipality, this is the right thing that the country needs. And this is just a short story, but I became very motivated since I heard that we have an opportunity to do that. In the mining sector, we cannot choose the local. If you are in the other industry, probably you would choose by logistic reason, by electricity region or other thing. But the mining business, we cannot choose the region, and then it will revert in an opportunity to develop a remote region and to keep the people doing a right job, keep the people at the region and developing people there. I think this is a thing that we have to consider when we think about doing mining business in Brazil or investing in mining business in Brazil. And I think joining with Mike and Miles and Paulo said about you need it in Brazil to have the right people and skilled team with the complementary disciplines to be a strong and to be prompt face to this challenge, because it's not easy, but it's reliable. And I think this is the solution for the mining sector in the near future and from now.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have a little bit of time. I don't want to hold the audience on you here, but I think it's a very important point that I would like to address to all of you. And I would like your opinion about this. I think the PDAC, not only, but the world is telling us that ESG is the main important thing to make sure that our projects has a filter, that our mine can be developed in a different way, I would say. But ESG is two components for me: attitude, and that is us, and perspective, which is the way that the people look at to us. And sometimes, doesn't matter how we do, the perspective is against us. And I think the accidents that we had brought this up very much. One of the issues that I face in my life is that sometimes I was doing the best, and like you, Carlos, and probably Mike, Paulo, and Miles have faced that. You're doing the best. You do something to a community, think you're doing the best, and then the community comes back to you and said, well, thank you, but I would prefer that you never existed, that you haven't been here. My life was simpler and better without you. And you look at them, they still missing healthy. They still missing progress. Sometimes missing even water and power. Standards of life that for us is impossible to think to exist without it. But because they see us hurting more than adding. And I think one of the points that I would address is the media is the biggest responsible for that. And media has been always not in favor of the mining companies. The good example was the Henka discussion. We didn't care about the Henka, right? No companies were looking to explore on Henka. No companies are looking to explore the Indian territories. But this was brought to the discussion, and we are the algos. We are the ones that probably want to interfere on that. So, and I think why this happens in Brazil and sometimes do not happen in another jurisdictions like Canada and Australia. I do have an opinion why the society there share more the profits and the value of the mine industry. Our industry is too much concentrated. Only few companies do represent 80% of our mining GDP. So we need to face how can we share that with the society of Brazil. And I think the answer to that is not that we need to pay more tax or we need to give dividends, but we need to tell them how they can participate in the mining business, because we do represent a lot to our economy, but we are just a few ones. So what is your opinion about this? How do you see we can change the perspective of the media and of their society over mining after those accidents and under the pressure that we have when we are brought to the discussions of be the ones that we're going to be beneficiary of the mining Indian territories, for example. Who would like to start, please?
Well, I'll have a go, please, Lewis. Maybe I'll try first. Mike? Yeah. Well, you're talking about the redistribution of wealth, aren't you? You're, as you mentioned there, and I said earlier on, Brazil is dominated by the large companies. And I think one of the challenges that we have being at the other end of the spectrum, the smaller companies, there is kind of a one-size-fits-all sort of legislation. We've discussed this before about tailings dams, for example, how they're whether you actually barely have a tailings dam like we do, or where you have enormous ones, which caused all these problems in the first place. As you know, with Serabi, we've taken the cowardly route of actually removing the tailings dam completely to allow us to move forward with our permitting and almost get a promising result from the local authorities, including the stakeholders, etc. So I think, but yes, you're right. I mean, we end up, and a lot of our ESG is actually putting in social programs that really are the responsibility of the municipality and the state, and you end up just replacing what the government or the municipality should be doing, and that's how you actually progress, which is okay in the short term, but it's not the long-term fix, is it? That's the point you're making. I think this problem is obviously worse in the north of Brazil and obviously in the more rural areas, and obviously in the south it's a different picture completely. But certainly in the north, it is a case of as I say, until the state governments actually and the municipalities are distribute their wealth better, and maybe the royalties, as we're trying to see, go to trickle down to the right people, it's always going to be a challenge.
Paulo, what about you?
So, Luis, I think you're putting me in a bit of a spot here because it is a very tough one, right? Look, I share many of the thoughts that you said and what Mike said as well. But I mean, I don't know if you are aware, all of you, unlike yourselves, I evolved during my career. What I mean by that is that I am no engineer or geologist, right? So I started wrong and then evolved to, the mining industry. And I actually have a degree in business and in marketing, right? So I have a bit of a bias, and I do feel, having been around as long as I have in the mining industry, that there's a lot of work and a lot of room to improve our messaging, our communication, and what is it that mining can actually do. Not to dispute what Mike just said, right? I mean, what Mike said is the challenge that we've seen in many different places, the shared value concept and all that. So that stays, right? What I would like to add is the role that institutions like the one that you represent, Luis, that the role that these institutions have in terms of sending the right message, investing in proper marketing, truthful communication and proper strategies to make sure that people understand what we do, right? Every time that I managed to put messages in the right way to tackle the right, call it customer, it's always been successful. So I think, for the right or wrong reasons, historically, mining companies haven't invested a great deal of thinking or strategic resources into proper communications and proper marketing, right? Like any other industry does. So, and it's not a question of gold plating or disguising. It's really showing what is it that we have been doing and the real impact that we've done, right? And we can stay here hours talking about the good impact that all the companies we represent actually have on the communities where we operate, even with the challenges that Mike posed.
Very well put. Carlos?
Yeah, as I said in the beginning, I think Brazil deserves new mining companies. I think this is, and I mentioned as well about Brazil has a cultural heritage against mining. In the other hand, they support a lot agribusiness. And in the end of the day, I think agribusiness and mining are the vectors of the development of the country, as we are producer of raw material for the world. We have a large extension country, and we have all possibility to be a large operator of a mining industry. I think that there is 2 points. One is that now again, I'm talking about reinforce the sustainability issues. I think we have a big opportunity to promote sustainable projects. I think Paulo has a good opportunity in Alagoas. Is a challenge for Appian, but it's a very good opportunity in Alagoas to demonstrate that the sustainable development for mining is feasible, is reliable. And we have in Maranhão a challenge to develop the same in a poor region. I think Carajás is not exactly the best example because the Vale has been doing this already more than 20 years and in a success in my perspective. And then in the second thing is I think Paulo mentioned, it's very happy to mention this about to empower the representativeness on mining in Brazil. I think as we have a big mining company in Brazil leading the GDP, and I think we deserve new mining companies to improve the representativeness in the mining sector, because we don't have a good influence on Congress as the agribusiness has. I think this is a main challenge for the mining sector as a whole.
Miles? Close?
Yep, to close. So I mean, I just sort of listening to my colleagues and your comments as well. I mean, I guess I had a few kind of just bullet point thoughts. I've worked in a lot of different countries over the years, and I would say that generally Brazil is pro-mining. There are challenges with gaining social license in any project, in any place, and you start not necessarily from a position of strength or comfort. But I don't have any examples personally of going somewhere in Brazil where the answer was just a flat no, go away. And I've had that experience in other places. In terms of the press, I mean, it's a very unfair situation because they can say whatever they want, whereas we have to be very careful about what we say. But having said that, I mean, I agree with Paulo, we don't sell ourselves well, and we probably deserve anyway the bad press we got for Brumadinho. Like in this day and age, we shouldn't be making those kind of mistakes. But where I'm very positive, I mean, I've grown up in a world where most people have got no idea where any of their metals come from. They've got no idea they need them, and they've certainly got no wish to have any more of them mined anywhere near them. Like England's a country of NIMBYs, not in my backyard. So for the first time, you're seeing, because of perhaps the electrification of cars more than anything else, people understanding the need for metals, whether it's rare earths, lithium, graphite, nickel, copper. All of a sudden, the entire population of the world thinks and understands that they need more of these metals. And, while some people here might think that we can fly into space and find someone on an asteroid, there is actual real support for mining and new mines. And I think that we should be looking for ways to use that and to create more positive messages for what we do.
Thank you very much. I think we are just on time. I have 5 minutes by my closing remarks, so I won't use that. So I want to ask you if any of you want to say any few words before I go to that.
Luis, from my end, just to thank very much all the panelists. Again, thank you, Carolina and Luis, for the opportunity to be here. And it was great to see you, Carlos, Mike, Miles. So that's the only thing I would like to add, if I may.
Okay, from my side, thanks for the organization, and thanks for all. And I think the 5 minutes is up to you, Luis, to give your speech. Thanks a lot.
Miles, Mike, do you want to say a few words?
Oh, I echo Carlos's words. Thank you very much for the invitation, and over to you, Luis.
Yeah, no, I thank you, everybody, and I have to say it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you all. I think the success of this panel was all from you, and well, my words will be brief. Guys, mining is a notorious cyclical. The COVID crisis initially exacerbated prices as gold, iron, copper, nickel under pressure in many commodities driven by demand and supply disruptions. Thought, with the vaccines being delivered and applied, there is a tendency of production takes discipline, and long-term investment decisions will be consistently driven to companies and countries that have done properly their homework. As a result, many companies will fail to new capitalizations for projects with no merits or because they are based in countries where security and favorable environmental are not in place. This is especially true for juniors mining and exploration projects. And this is all about PDAC, juniors and prospectors. Without the structural changes in Brazil pointed by yourselves here, we will face disadvantaged capital competitions. But the message that you have passed is that Brazil is not worse or better, but we need to improve and continue work. Therefore, it's important that mining rules in Brazil need to be revised. We need to accept that giant deposits won't be found so easy anymore, and our regulations need to be adapted to this new reality, considering a large number of small, medium projects and companies. Can you imagine your life today without iPhones, without Zoom, electrical cars? It's impossible. Well, this life does not exist without mining. Mining will take place, if not in Brazil, in other countries. we are still very behind in terms of geological knowledge. Our land compared to our peers. Meanwhile, we see exploration technologies preparing the exploration of oceans and space. But our miners and explorers can no longer afford to do it alone. Our government needs to innovate and grow with us. It's a real plan of cooperation to be put in action here, not just in words or promises. They need to be willing to form partnership in co-branding alliance with strong branding or environmental credentials. We acknowledge that minerals and metal make a major contribution to the world economic and modern societies. Mining offers the opportunity to catalyze broad-based economic development, reduce poverty, and maximize social and economic benefits, as well as effectively address negative environmental and social impacts. This is not me saying, this is Rio Environmental Congress back 20 years ago that pointed. In this regard, we recognize that governments need strong capacities to develop, manage, and regulate the mining industries. In the interest of sustainable development, it's important a strong and effective legal and regulatory frameworks, policies, and practices, efficiency and transparency. It's been a pleasure being here with all of you this morning. Thank you for all your patience. It's been an honor to be among such accomplished individuals as our panelists, Carlos, Paulo, Mike, and Miles, and be able to receive their perspective about their views of Brazil in terms of investment opportunities. I wish you all a very good week. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Carolina,
Thank you, Luis.
back to you.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution here today. What a great panel, what a great discussion. Luis, thank you for moderating it so well. And then Miles, Mike, Paulo, Carlos, for sharing all your thoughts and knowledge and your insights with our guests. And so thank you all for joining us here today. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everyone, for your participation here today. We really appreciate your partnership. Thank you.